So, George, I just want to start this little section with an email from Eden, who writes in to hello@popkitchenpodcast.com, just like you can. Hi, James and George. I wrote a few episodes back regarding the decline of horror movies and asked for your thoughts. You ended up recommending Men to me as a good recent horror movie. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to watch it yet as I'm waiting for a streaming service to get it in the UK. With that being said, I did go and watch Barbarian in the cinema recently and absolutely loved it. Restored a lot of feelings and emotions I used to have with classic horror films. Wanted to know if you had managed to see it yet and had any thoughts. Keep up the quality work each week. Loving every episode. Kind regards, Eden.
Yes. Thank you, Eden. So, Barbarian, absolutely. I have now gone and seen Barbarian, as has James. So, Barbarian is, as you mentioned, this horror film that actually came out in September in the US and came out probably about a month ago in the UK. We are getting to it quite late, but it has definitely been a kind of word of mouth hit that's being talked about. I've got a lot of buzz. Have you seen Barbarian? Want to see it? Eden's email, case in point. And it's done very well off the back of that. It had a budget of about $4.5 million, and it's made about $44 million. So it's made 10 times its budget, which is great.
Classic horror profit margin.
Exactly, fantastic. It had a very well executed marketing campaign where it actually, contrary to the current trend, really didn't show you that much. Yeah. And Barbarian is absolutely one of those films where the less you know about it, the better. And if you're listening out loud, do not worry. We will not be revealing
spoiler-free impressions.
Absolutely spoiler-free impressions right now. All I will do is, in setting up the plot, I will describe the first 3 minutes of the plot, and that is all you need to know. And that is that. So, yes, I finally went to see a screening of Barbarian, knowing very little about it, other than it was a horror film and it had a lot of buzz. Here's the initial setup. It's the middle of the night. It's raining, and this woman pulls up outside this house. It's dark. She pulls out her phone, and it's an Airbnb she's booked. She gets out the car. She gets her stuff. She gets up to the front porch, covered in rain. She looks at the code for the key in the key safe, and she types in the code, and the code doesn't work. She goes, oh, shit. She types it in again, doesn't work. She goes back on her phone, checks it again. She's got the code wrong. She types in the code again. It's right. She opens it. There's no key inside. She goes, oh, shit. She calls the Airbnb people.
It's the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night. The door won't open. She calls the Airbnb people, goes straight to voicemail. Obviously, she can't get through. And she's really frustrated. She goes back to her car. She gets in. And she might just be about to drive away. We don't know, when a light comes on in the house. And she sort of sees it and thinks, what? She gets out of the car, goes back up to the porch, and looks through the window, and there's a man in there. She rings the doorbell of the house, and the door opens, and it's Bill Skarsgård,
the horror guy.
Yeah, fantastically cast. Talk about that in a second.
He played It in the new It movie.
Pennywise the clown in It, right? And she sort of says, "Who are you?" And he says, "Who are you?"
He's like just woken up.
Yeah.
He's like,
"Who are you?" And they quickly ascertain that she's booked this place on Airbnb. He's booked it on Home Away, like a different service.
Yeah.
The booking is double booked. He says, let me just run and get my phone and I'll just check these details. So he runs upstairs to get his phone. She looks around and all the houses in the neighborhood all the lights are off. There's no sign of life. Bill Skarsgård then comes downstairs and he sort of says, look, why don't you come in where it's dry, out of the rain, and we can call these idiots and get this thing sorted out. And he has that very Bill Skarsgård blend of charm and slight sinisterness.
Yeah.
And she looks around, she pauses, and then she goes inside.
And the camera sort of follows it through the wall.
And the title says Barbarian. And that's all I'm going to tell you, because that's all you need to know. What then precedes is a horror film that is scary, freaky, and James, I have to say, really, really good fun.
Wasn't it great?
I absolutely loved this film. So I saw it first at the tours, and I left the cinema and I text James. I said, I've just seen Barbarian. I really can't wait to talk about it on the show. Catch it if you can. I'm so glad you did today when you told me
you'd seen it. Been on my list, and I thought, right, okay.
I had an absolute blast. There were moments in this film. I think it's worth saying that I think the reason it works is that it is so fantastically executed. Every single little bit, like just that opening 3 minutes that I was describing, every single bit of that plotting is so well done. And you really, like I said, if you mustn't know what happens in the film, because that can be ruined. I have to say, I after I've seen the film, I'd followed up on a couple of other reviews, get some things, and even Mark Kermode, who is usually very good at not spoiling stuff, he revealed so much of the film as setup, and I was like, if I'd known that going in, that completely spoils so much, right? I love how one of the best things that stands out about this film is its sick sense of humor.
Yeah.
So the director Zach Kreger used to be a comedy, has a background in comedy, a bit like Jordan Peele came from comedy, moved to horror.
Yes, yeah.
And there is this really witty, playful, cruel,
cynical,
sense of humor running through it.
It's a very modern script as well,
Exactly.
and it never felt, I don't know, like cliched for being modern. The writing works.
It's very modern. You have all the Airbnb, all these tropes, but meanwhile, it fully contextualizes itself with horror tropes from the start.
Yes.
You've got this weird house. You've got a stranger's meeting. You've got maybe there's something downstairs, in a cellar with a light that doesn't work. Just fun stuff that when these things happen, you go, oh, yeah, horror tropes.
Yeah.
And it has that very 80s lettering from the side. It's the same Stranger Things font. I want to know what the actual font name for that is.
Yeah.
Very sort of Stephen King territory. I don't want to spoil much, but there was a sequence about halfway through that I thought was genuinely terrifying.
Yeah.
I was really, really squirming, and me and my flatmate just squirming in our seats watching this thing. And what's brilliant is that, I only saw it in a theatre with only like a handful of other people.
Yeah.
But it's one of those great horror films that makes you squirm and look away and put your hands over your eyes, but also
Trapped.
lean in, and you want to see what happens next, and it's completely got you.
What stood out to me when I watched it is how impeccable the pacing is.
Yes.
It knows exactly how good its horror concept is and when to give you something completely different to keep you engaged. Because how many times have you seen a horror film when you go, the actual concept was tired by the end of it became silly, it became this. Yeah. As soon as it like gets to the high point of horror, it almost goes, okay, and now I'm going to show you something very different.
Yeah.
And then as soon as it does it again, you go, now I want to tell you why.
Yes.
And then it does it again, and then it gives you an ending, which is I think works.
Absolutely.
And I just thought that what a masterclass in pacing for that film, which I don't think many horror films are that good at doing.
I agree. It's about, I think it's like 100 minutes, maybe 107 minutes, something like that.
Perfect.
The thing that happens halfway through, the decision, the sort of, okay, now we're going to do this. I thought, that's really bold. And then there was a couple of minutes I thought, is this going to work? And then I was like, I actually really like what they're doing here.
Yeah.
And I love the way in its third act it headed in. With all these films, all these horror films, the third act is the clincher. So talking about Men, for example, like Men is really creepy and freaky, but the third act is where, absolutely fair enough, it loses a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it does let down. This, I think, stuck the landing.
Yeah.
And I just really enjoyed. Did you enjoy it?
It takes you by surprise at the end, like how you're feeling about it. I'm like, and then just those moments in the middle, which I found so funny. We'll chat when we do spoilers afterwards about some of these funny moments. But I just was actually laughing, and that sort of horror being close to comedy works really well as a watching experience. But also, and again, it's like a pacing of your emotions too.
But there are images, moments in this that are
really dark.
That balance is, like so there's moments that can make you laugh and moments that are witty, but there are moments that are incredibly dark.
And it doesn't spell anything out for you when you start knowing the answer of what has happened. You are left to fill in the blanks, and you can completely understand what's happened without it like shoving it down your throat. But that's
in your mind, filling out the blanks of what you realise that has the thing, you're like, oh my God, that is incredibly dark, incredibly wicked. I think
it's quite playful with aspect ratios and the format in which it tells its story, and it has a lot of fun with cinematography and the way that the camera moves through walls.
It's also, it gave me that kind of exciting buzz that I had after I watched It Follows. It's worth saying there's a superficial comparison that they're both set in Detroit, right?
Yeah.
But when you watch It Follows, you kind of came away thinking, oh, that's so fresh, so new. I've really seen something like a new take, and this is, in many ways, completely different to It Follows. It doesn't hang on like a central concept in the same way that did, but it is kind of 80s inflected, John Carpenter's slightly-esque horror. And that's the thing. I was talking to my friend afterwards, and Hereditary is a film that is incredibly disturbing and dark and distressing and scary. Don't get me wrong. But I never had. Hereditary is not a fun film. No. I didn't come away you just come away thinking, Christ, that was a ride, just a ride into hell. Whereas this, I really felt like I'd had the full service. It generally felt like a really great cinema experience because you had fun. You laughed, you got scared, you didn't cry, but you really felt like something. You feel energized.
I think good horror is one of the most satisfying film experiences. When a horror film is a well-executed concept that sticks the landing, I think there's nothing as filling when it comes to cinema. You're like, oh yes, they did it.
Yeah, I'm really. You enjoyed it.
You really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. I had so much fun with it. I was scared. I was like,
it is scary. Thank you. Can we just bet that?
It's scary. It's a very, very good scare.
A really good
Lots
sort of
like tight areas. I can't get out. I just want to leave.
Yeah, and the plot, which also happens
It's
within
gross
the film
as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's got this grotesque sort of squishiness to it. There's we'll talk about it in the spoilers. There's one moment I was like, that is so gross.
It's awful.
There's the plot literally unfolds like someone walking through a dark space with a torch.
Yeah.
And that it slowly reveals itself, and your mind is quickly trying to put things together about what it is. I love the sort of 80s kind of
The haunting chimes.
And the casting of Bill Skarsgård again is just brilliant because
a wondreful play on expectations and everything.
You bring this metatextual expectation of him as a horror character, and like I said, he as his face and everything, he's got half charm, half sinisterness, and his whole element in the beginning, that's what makes you lean in. You're watching him, you're studying him, his behavior,
every single twitch of the eye, and the thing.
Can this person be trusted?
Just a hard Pulp Kitchen thumbs up from us.
Absolutely, and in a way, it reminded me a bit of when I saw Glass Onion, and and even structurally, there are elements that Glass Onion and Barbarian have a lot of similar, which is like maybe something will happen and then we'll change the thing over here and we'll do this.
Yeah.
And I had similarly with Glass Onion such a great time and such a good buzz. It really made me feel great. There's a lot to talk about in terms of spoilers with this film, but we are going to do actually like a breakaway spoiler special that's a bonus to this episode. So if you finish this episode, if you check the feed, we'll do spoiler chat about Barbarian. But we're also, James has caught up with a couple of films recently, and we'll just go over some quick spoiler chat about Banshees of Inisherin and Living as well. Barbarian. If you haven't seen it, go and see it. Check it out as quickly as you can. Do not read or watch any other reviews apart from this one about it.
Just go and watch
enjoy.
It
go
and have fun.
and enjoy.
Thank you, Eden, for the email.
Yeah.
Okay, so George, you and I just did a review of Barbarian on the channel, and we're very desperate to talk about details of the plot. If you haven't seen it, please stop. Please go and listen to our spoiler-free review of Barbarian, because, as George said, there is so much that could ruin what this film is doing.
This is a spoiler zone.
Now we're going to talk about the plot. Just in case you missed that bit, George and I really, really like the film. Very excited about what it's done. But yeah, Barbarian. Let's go into some of the things about what happened in this film.
I mean, I think... Okay. Well, no, you go first.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things I said in my review was that I found it's so perfectly paced and it knows exactly when to end to like move on to something else. Yeah. And the moment when it, your first reveal of the monster downstairs, and then you cut to Justin Long, who is this TV producer, writer, and the mood completely changes, and you just now are following his descent into the same situation. But one of the moments I just was laughing so hard is when he discovers this horror cliche of basically a sex dungeon room in his basement. He just gets the tape measure out and Google's does underground square footage count towards the house. Brilliant. And he's measuring, and he's just completely not aware of the fact that he's just moving the thing
this is
down.
And that's why
the
casting of Justin Long is perfect, because so obviously if you've seen the film you know this, but so Justin Long's there's this actor who's been completely coughed up and he's gone back to his house to try and sell it, and
he's being cancelled for a sexual abuse allegation.
And what I love, it's like the director said, let's get an entirely different genre of film in this film. Let's get a Justin Long comedy into this film, and you have this comedic character who's completely unaware that they are in a horror film. And the whole thing about gross living area and how to measure the space, and you're right, he's walking through this dark area.
He goes downstairs. Cages and he sees basically like a horrible place where people are chained up and basically had sex with, and then he sees more and he goes, holy shit. And he's measuring the square footage, and it's such a modern reaction to it. Someone who's so self-involved, who has zero empathy, just to go, oh my God, I can make so much money. I need to sell my house and this and that.
And also like that sort of 20-minute detour it takes to explain who Justin Long is, this sort of man he is.
And when he first goes into the house, we already know what's happened there. But when he sees the wash bag, the toothbrush, all the other stuff,
fuck?
and he's like not really engaged. He's like, what the fuck, bro? Like, I don't. Did anyone come into my house? Just the Airbnb thing as well. I just think it's such a clever concept of like a mismatch gone wrong.
I like the way because basically the first act of Bill Skarsgård is a complete red herring.
Yeah,
really red herring.
And they're perfectly playing on your expectations of Bill Skarsgård as an actor.
Exactly, but by doing that, they up your anxiety. So when the actual horror films, you feel kind of chill and jumpy.
Yeah.
So the whole thing now with Bill Skarsgård, he's fine.
He's actually he sort of reveals himself to be like really emotionally mature and aware of the fact that he's a strange man. He has invited her in, but he doesn't want to sort of make her feel uncomfortable. He's like, I can sleep here, and by all means.
But then he'll do that thing, which is just a drip drop of uncomfortability, where he'll say like, "Oh, Tess, that's a pretty name."
Yeah. Always like, "Would you like a drink? Oh, you can watch me make it this time," because he's always like trying to be so woke and aware of the fact that she's there. And I don't know the lead actor. Let me just find out.
Georgina Campbell.
Georgina Campbell, I thought was also great in this.
Yeah,
and there's later moments where it's that horror moment where she gets the police to try and help her, but because she's been locked in a dungeon for a few days, she looks like a homeless person who's like a crack addict, and the police just do not believe her because she has the most horrendous concept to try and explain. So, do you understand? I've been locked in a basement. There is the barbaric monster who is going to kill the guy, and they're like, okay, I've got another call.
Yeah, exactly.
And she just looks like a crackhead, basically.
Just to run through it, I think also let's try and run through it narratively. Narrative order,
yes, let's
right?
do it.
So, like, obviously, Bill Skarsgård lets her in, and they have that wonderfully tense encounter. Like I said, it's perfectly well-meaning. Then he'll say the odd thing, which is a little bit creepy. And actually, I think if you look at the male characters in this film, him, Bill Skarsgård, Justin Long, and who I am taking to be the Barbarian of the title, right? That's a very interesting thing about what's happening there. There's that great first scare in the middle of the night where her door is open, and you hear that sort of squeal and the scurrying. And again, Bill Skarsgård having the nightmare is irrelevant to the plot. Yeah. But you are just like, what the fuck is going on? And then when she comes out to see him, the door closing behind. And you realise after you've seen the film, the whole point that cellar door locks on the inside is because he would have had victims down there, right? And then there's obviously when she goes to that interview with the filmmaker and she says to the person, "Oh, I'm staying at an Airbnb in Brightwood or whatever."
Yeah.
And she goes, "Brightwood? You shouldn't stay there." And now at the time I'm thinking that's because it's a derelict neighborhood and with lots of social deprivation. I think it's also because that person's like, lots of women went missing in that area.
Yeah.
Like it's notorious for crime and vice. Then you've got the bit where the whole discovery scene of her in the cellar finding the rope, opening the door,
and it descends. You think it descends
yeah,
into one thing, and then it goes down
when she
deeper.
And I love clever character who uses the mirror, and she's just it gives us. She uses the mirror to reflect the light down into the gap because at first she's like, nope,
not doing that. Yeah,
and the sort of the light just catches the shine of the door handle, and you're watching, and already you're thinking, just no, get out, do not
leave.
And she walks in, and obviously it's that really dark, horrible video camera, soiled bed, bucket, hands on the wall. And then when Bill Skarsgård goes down, and then he says, obviously I will go down and check, and then he doesn't reply.
Yeah.
And the whole thing when then she follows down because he's not answering. I'm thinking, well, it's a trap.
He's the one.
He's trapped you.
Yeah.
And then, but he's not in the room. And then you see the hinges of this other door. And that moment where she opens it and it reveals that darker underground tunnel, which has just got the deepest black.
And then when you see finally the silhouette of what is there and like the scream
but that's the thing. Because when when I said that moment in the middle, generally, that whole descent into the bottom chasm.
So well done.
And hearing Bill Skarsgård speak, I was just on the edge of my seat.
And when he appears, you're scared.
Yeah.
And you have your first jump scare. You're like, oh my God. And then there's a second one.
Brilliant reveal.
Grotesque. And
and then it cuts to Justin Long on the freeway.
Justin Long. Like again, as soon as that would tire you out, it just cuts you off, and then you get the whole Justin Long sequence. And I also want to talk about the moment where it goes back in time to this new development, which reveals this man that basically was an electrician who would, capture young women, bring them down, and then he would basically have babies, make the babies have the babies.
Awful dark.
And it has this really, and it doesn't just throw it in your face. It sort of switches its aspect ratio. It's bright and colourful. The neighbourhood, which is now derelict, was this like new project in the 1950s, I want to say. And he just is out buying some very dodgy like hardware shop stuff, and he just sees this woman who's getting her groceries, and the camera like stays through his car window and just follows as he watches her. And he lets himself into her house, pretending to be one thing, and is really like locking her window.
What's it called? Like vetting it, the whole place.
He's like, I'm sorry, man. I'm just here to
for his
check
abduction
up
later.
An electrician fault.
Well, also you missed that. Before that, with the creature, we've discovered that like there's this horrible room and there's this breastfeeding tape playing. Right?
Yes, yeah.
So when he goes to the supermarket and he's buying diapers and plastic sheets, and you're like, oh my! That's when I started to realize what was happening.
Yeah,
and he's obviously keeping these women and
it
fathering children and
it leads you to figure it out. It doesn't just show you everything that happened, and by the time you sort of catch up with that person later that this is what has been happening and it's horrible.
Yeah. And then when you cut back to you're right. The whole 80s switcheroo I thought was
Sorry, it's 80s, right?
Brilliant casting of Richard Brake, who's a
Yeah.
genre actor who's been in this territory so many times. When I saw him, I was like, here he is.
Perfect.
Skeletal, horrible.
Stone, non-empathetic.
Looks like a walking cigarette.
Yeah.
And then they reveal the house, the interior of the house, like in the 80s. And then
it's completely
it
different.
opens the cellar door and the screaming from under the... Yeah, very dark. But then when it cuts back to the present... Also, sorry, there's so many... Oh my God, there's so many good details to this film. When Justin Long is down in the crypt, as we could call it, I suppose, the catacombs.
Yeah.
And he hasn't encountered the mother yet. But then he discovers the room, and then the tape measure, which you've said, which was a comedic device, then rattles.
Oh yeah,
and it's like this horror
thing.
thing.
And there was this other great moment where the monster was chasing him down the hallway, but when he got close to the father's room, she didn't want to go.
Yeah.
That was like, she was like, oh, I'm not going in there,
Yeah.
because she probably knows like he's probably the worst horror, or he's the monster really.
But then also, I thought because the bell was there, he would ring the bell and she would bring him stuff.
Oh, probably.
Keep him alive. But
Yeah.
but I also agree that she's probably like in service to him.
Yeah.
The moment with the bottle.
Oh my God. And like the bottle, it almost felt like 3D. It was like wide and like some black hairs dripping from the thing.
Grotesque.
And then when she takes him out to go,
yeah,
there's a
breastfeeding.
breastfeeding scene, which is just, as you can imagine, awful.
And the whole third act.
The switch on how you feel about that character towards the end, right?
What with Justin Long, I mean?
No, like when, there's that. But when you actually start right at the end, you feel a lot of sadness towards this woman who just was, never really a person, was manipulated into thinking she needed to be a mother and a provider. There's also some funny action, like the way which Justin Long sacrifices her. Oh my God, you slipped, you were falling. Yeah. And when what it does really well, which is the thing that a lot of horror video games do, which is like you have safe rooms in video games, and like this is where you like keep your equipment, and like that the monster's not coming in. But what really good video games do is they make you think you have a safe space, and then your monster like bursts through. If you've ever played Resident Evil 2, you'll know what I'm talking about. And this does the same thing, where like they're with this guy who like has been living in the area for ages, and they're like, "Are you sure that we're safe?" And he's like, I've been living here for 15 years, and she's never coming. Boom! And she just bursts through the wall and comes straight in. And I was like terrified, but laughing that happened.
I was just thinking about the creature design as well, because often with these things, like the creature design can let you down so much.
Yeah.
But what great is like she is human, so you perfectly accept how she looks, but she's she's like a mutation. She's incredibly tall, incredibly strong. So she's human, but not quite.
It's sort of implied as byproduct of like multiple layers of incest.
Yeah. And I mean that is the horror sort of heart of it. But the journey and
some of the things they do when she escapes and she climbs out the window, and they do this thing with the camera where her arms like crawl, and you're watching it and you're just like, you're shaking because you just want to get out.
But that's the thing as well, because I love the homeless guy switcheroo as well, because earlier in the film, before any of the Cellar stuff has happened, after she comes back with the interview with the filmmaker, you just see this figure running at her.
After you've been told that it's a scary area, right?
Yeah. Little girl, don't go in there.
And he's trying to tell her, like, do not go in that house. Like, he knows the horror.
And obviously you're like, oh my God, what is this person outside? And that just primes you for it. I just hats off to Zach Cregger for putting it together. And I know some people might be able to pick apart it and stuff, but like I think you're really missing the point that this has been a really well executed film.
So good. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts and what they thought of it. If you have any impressions on Barbarian, please write into hello@popkitchenpodcast.com and we'll read them out on the show.
Can we just record that, but for the non-spoiler version, which we didn't do, did we?
Yeah, let's just do it again.
Okay. So we're going to do spoilers in that separate... Sorry. So if you want to hear spoilers for Barbarian, head over for our spoiler special that'll be coming out this week as well. But in the meantime, if you have any thoughts on the film, if you've seen it, if you didn't like it, you did like it, you want to talk about it more, send your emails into hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com as usual. Thank you.